In my video on Yom Kippur, I've already said that the information is rolling in slowly and it's contradictory. So you won't be surprised that some of the things that are said aren't true anymore. It looked at the time like a big concerted military effort. There was a talk of a camouflaged guy throwing real grenades. I have later, after that video, heard of assault weapons, full automatic assault weapons, and you will see he actually shot his own handmade gun. And it isn't even semi-automatic, and that means something really. He has to load every single shot. That's how bad his weaponry was. It does not require a big organization behind him, so it doesn't restrict the limits, the abilities to a big state actor or a terror organization that is already well versed into these things, like an Islamic terror organization. And I've already said back then that an Islamic one is very unlikely because a kebab shop or a doner shop was attacked, which is run by a Turkish businessman. So it isn't a big organization, or at least there are more options on the table who are more likely than a big involvement of a terrorist organization. Still, it is an act of terror. He said into the camera his motivation. We'll come to that later. But first, the name is Stéphane Ballier. He is a French, or he is the German of French descent, or of his family name points to heritage from a French-speaking country. That could also be Belgium, or that could be Switzerland. He had built his 4 guns all on his own. I don't see any military clobber. It's a black suit. He has a white shawl or something, or a neckerchief. I don't know how that can even be mistaken for military uniform. The one witness who saw that is not to blame. I have the problem with my problem is with the journalists who don't check that, or who still stick with the wording even though the stuff in front of their eyes is obviously contradicting it. It is normal for witnesses who have just a split second to see something that doesn't exist, and this is something to keep in mind for all these 9/11 truthers as well. Some witness statement does not guarantee that anything really happened. What is problematic, though, is when journalists claim that something is happening and they see that it isn't while they speak. He had explosives in his car. They were not real grenades. He also threw explosives, one into the cemetery and another one into the shop. His weaponry was not well built, also not very on target. He shot a tire of his runaway car. Still, the self-made weaponry and the level of organization speak of a smart person, and I will talk about this in more detail later. That is a bit of a problem. He has studied chemistry and worked as a radio engineer. The streaming did actually occur. In my Yom Kippur video, I said it did go nowhere, but that was just because nobody saw it. He streamed it on Twitch. Less than 60 people actually viewed it. For me, the intention whore thing really does not make much sense. Even after he was caught, even after all these videos were taken down from the platforms, not more than a couple of thousand, I think somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 viewers had seen the material in its entirety. I think this will not gain him further fame, and it's probably not the main motivation. I'm saying this because we are now seeing an exploitation of what was going on, and what our politicians care about is to stop the spread of information. That's very important to them, and I find it really dangerous. And even if this fame whore theory were true, we still have to trade the goods of keeping the information flowing around and allow people to judge what is going on, or to protect us from some occasional act of violence. I'm saying this because our freedoms sometimes require that we take risks. We drive the cars because we know it is important to get to work, yes, it just creates a lot of freedom for us, you know, and we accept that a car accident, for example, is the result of this activity. We also drink alcohol, we smoke, and so on and so on. So what is more important is always a crucial factor. And I always maintain that whatever gives too much power to the authorities is more dangerous than your occasional terror attack. And you have to keep that in mind because, for example, Adolf Hitler said that gays are actually the better man. And Lenin and Stalin both said that they are for Jews and their protection. It did not help. It did not help the Jews in the Soviet Union, and it did not help the homosexuals in the Third Reich. The lip services of our elites do not matter. Once you have given up all your freedoms and trust the elites blindly, it's over. You can no longer protect any minorities, and you cannot, you know, you have to be very careful. The good of protecting us against such an attack must be weighed against the overall good of protecting us against a tyranny that's much more devastating and kills many more people than that. So the other thing is that I don't believe that the motivation is a big deal in the first place. I believe that you have to consider to go to prison and to be shot dead while you're in the act. So a lot of motivation goes before that. And then to resemble something that has been done before, maybe a little, I don't know, a little extra for the perpetrator, but it's not his main motivation. So I said, yeah, if it is a crucial part of the motivation, I do not think it is ever a crucial part of some murderer's motivation. It is like the war paint of the Native Americans or something. A thing you put on to go on a warpath. You resemble somebody else whose image you have in front of you, but that does not make you do it. So shutting down information and the flow of information is never the solution. Never. Okay, now I go into a difficult part of this video because I want to talk about the motivation. Apparently he had kept 2 bottles in his home that had a paper stuck in them which read loser. I think even in English, I've forgotten, but it read loser. He seems to be an incel or something similar. Somebody who is at the lowest end of the social spectrum and doesn't get girls, doesn't get laid. And his motivation as he prefaces his shooting in the video is explained by himself as stopping the replacement of the native population with Muslims through an elite that tries to offset the birth shortage brought upon us by feminism. So this is a guy who doesn't get laid and who blames feminism for it. He also has found a theory that claims Jews have brought upon us feminism, and also that all religions deserve the same wrath. So shooting up a religious community brings about some improvement. And I'm mentioning this because this is a bunch of half-truths. And I'm saying this because we can only convince people of better ideas if we discuss what's wrong. There is another elephant in the room, and that is I personally spent very little time debating neo-Nazis. For once, they don't like me, and second, I would not spend too much time on that because I do see the left as a much bigger threat to Jews and to everybody else than neo-Nazis. Yes, these people have a run, they are crazy, and increasingly they become violent. But this is a reaction of the left silencing them so aggressively as they do. Because people need an option to further their political interests peacefully. And no matter what these political interests are, if you deprive them of all options, if you don't allow them to elect any parties, if you don't allow them to make their arguments, to state their cases in public, they will resort to violence, and it does not matter who. And I'm saying this also to the anti-Islamic people on the conservative side. You do not win over Muslims if you just say Islam is crap. You have to throw it all out of the window, and you cannot convert anybody to Islam ever. You have no chance to convince people of becoming Muslims, because that is anti-democratic. It is against our constitution. That's something I actually hear a lot here in Germany. That is not the way how you go about things. You have to resolve the problem. And you can only solve the problem if you talk to people and if you change their minds. And what I've found is that the left is very, very busy in finding excuses not to talk. This is very important to them, and this has a dire background, and it is, they don't want this to stop. They don't want this to be solved. They also don't want Islamism to be solved. They don't want people to talk, because the issue is never the issue, as David Horowitz always says. The issue is always the revolution. They want people to get aggressive, to get mad at each other, to throw grenades, and slowly move into a civil war situation. I don't want to talk too much about details of my personal life, but I have talked a Holocaust denier out of this nonsense. I'm just saying, I'm not spending my time online on these things, because the group that is behind these ideas is too small to take over the government, at least at this point in history. So I spend the conversation mostly on the crazies on the political left, right? That does not stop us, and it should not stop us from caring about the nutcases that may like to stop immigration. And I also say that the Islamic world is as backwards as it is, because smart people care a lot about the bigger problems, which is the crazies around them, than the stuff that would improve their lives. While smart people in the Western world come around to do medical research or to improve technology, smart people in the Muslim world are occupied with protecting their families against morons. Okay, that's completely taking up all their time. And it's also something that red-pilled me, and I see a hell load of engineers and software developers and so on taking their time to explain in detail to dumb people how stuff works and how the Greens are wrong. If you go to conservative blogs in Germany, Tischis Einblick and Ach Gut, run by a Jew, Henrik Broder, you will find endless explanations of how the power grid works, endless details about engineering. And this is because the smart people occupy themselves with dealing with dumb people, and this is part of the explanation. As much as you despise this murderer, he has tried to study chemistry, and we don't know what stops him. Apparently, he is perfectly capable of building bombs, so and planning something like such an attack. So it's very likely that this is an over-average IQ person. But for the sake of brevity and just to give an overall idea of the problem, we have to address the fact that this guy may have an over-average IQ, but cannot find anything to do. with his life. And this is a bigger problem. And I have said incel. Of course, I do not know such details. If he ever got laid in his younger years, but at this point, when he was arrested, he did not. He had absolutely nothing going for him. The question really is, how did our society end up like this? He is not an exception. If you go to a BitChute, which is not a neo-Nazi site, but hosts a hell load of neo-Nazis, like Gap, that's also there. Those who run these sites, they don't want to promote neo-Nazism. But these people are there, and a lot of them are also talking about not getting laid, basically. They call themselves, they don't like to call themselves incels, but that's behind it. There is this pride. They try to take pride in it and say, well, we are MGTOWs, we're just going our own way. But it's not, the explanation for how the masses behave. And I see a decline in marriages, a decline of childbirth. That's also what this guy was actually about. I mean, this was what concerned him. These are real things. There's a real problem with people not getting laid. And the entire gender mainstreaming discussion can only be had among people who do not get laid. It's so mad. We have an entire generation that is severely undersexed. We can barely tell what genitals belong to what sex. And still we scold the older generations for having no sex education in school. They had sex and we didn't. We were taught about sex in school when we shouldn't have. And what adds to this entire confusion is, and I'm now thinking back to my old school days, which is, I think, the experience that is very similar to the experience of the school shooter. We are the same generation, the millennials, the infamous millennials. And at that time, we had to literally beg our teachers to teach us something of value. We took extra courses very often. I took a number of extra courses to learn some tangible skills in school. Sometimes at the cost of having good marks at the standard classes that we had to take. And the curriculum was littered with a lot of arts. German and English had to be taught on the basis of literature texts, art, poetry, kind of texts. We could not read just medical essays or law or whatever. No, it had to be art, and it had to be painting, and it had to be religion, that kind of stuff. The more irrelevant it was for our professional advancement, the more prominent it was for our teachers. And that is because our teachers used to be in this Woodstock generation. They were all about, playing the guitar, being hip and fun. And so they kept us busy with stuff they thought was fun, but was not fun to us, okay? And we were very, very professional. And at the time, and this is overlooked a lot when we talk about this, the millennial generation now being into socialism and into gender mainstreaming and feminism and blah, blah, blah. What we overlook is that at the time we were an extremely professional generation that was scolded from all sides that we were too career-minded, that we were too focused. There was the Institute for German Language, I think it's called, taxpayer-funded rubbish institution, that selected words for the unword. That Orwellian thing actually exists here. The unword of the year, such things as human capital, human departments, and so on, because they said that our generation was already too much into career and focus and having no fun and taking no spare time and being overworked, and there was this burnout hype at the time. And when those those words were marked as reducing us to mere means of production, when this talk was going on, we still kept kind of working towards our professional ends, and we thought that with all that trouble we took we would at least be as skillful as our fathers and our grandfathers. What we found out was, after all these forced rubbish courses, we were less educated and less skilled than our parents and grandparents. Even though we have put in a lot of sleepless nights, we have put in a lot of extra work, and we have made huge sacrifices, like not having sex. This was becoming ever more prominent when the bachelor degree was introduced in continental Europe. There was the Bologna Agreement, that was an EU agreement, that the English world degrees after 3 years were introduced to our universities, and those degrees were not accepted by the corporations at the time, because the previous diploma was targeted for a longer period of studies, right? They are measured in longer terms. And when we ended university after 3 years as planned, we were considered to be less educated than those who had the diploma, despite the fact that we had to complete more courses in these 3 years than the equivalent would have been in the diploma. They just had less courses per time unit. So it was a very stressful change, and at the time, again, the main criticism of the bachelor degree was, our generation is already too focused. Why do these millennials work all the time and get the burnout and so on and so on? So this was the general vibe. And then the same generation, keep that in mind, the very same generation, and that's the generation of the shooter as well, was also the generation internship. That happened probably because of the financial crash in 2008, the Lehman Brothers breakdown. And what happened really was that a lot of these people who have been kept really, really busy for their entire youth and have forfeited their youth in pursuit of a career ended up working for free. And we had to ask our parents for money and shelter, which was incredibly humiliating after we had spent so much effort into our careers, right? Some of us have learned a couple of languages that had no purpose at all at the working place whatsoever. And this is not appreciated at all. The market does not appreciate it, and it's also not culturally appreciated. And our society was too slow, I think, in changing the paradigm in education. We would not have ended up with trying to get some tangible skills, but never ever, making it into a field long enough to become good at it. And a major problem, what probably led this guy to become a murderer, is that many of us have to change so often their perspectives. They move places, they move from this job to that job. Our generation was told to always be flexible, and now we are even mocked for not changing our minds fast enough and not being flexible enough. But if you are constantly flexible, you do not become good at anything. You just become average at anything you start. And your value on the market keeps decreasing as much as you learn new stuff. And this is not the experience the elder generations had. The elder generations had the options of improving their lives from year to year, and they expected a pay rise over their professional careers. And this is certainly gone for many of us. And this guy, who probably has a good degree, a good grammar school degree, could not parlay this into some tangible skills that he could sell to the market, and other people would pay for it. And this same generation is now the generation that does not make it on the property ladder. It finds itself at the end of 20 or at the early 30s at an age where their parents and their grandparents built homes, had their own homes, had the property to raise a family in it. At least if they had spent so much time, building up their careers. They are not all stupid. And you have these people who have actually made enormous sacrifices that are also not spoken about. These incels are people who have worked like crazy, more than their parents and their grandparents, much more, and had no sex during that time. Just imagine what sacrifice that is. They have basically given up their youth to create a career that then ends in low-paying jobs, and sometimes in no jobs. And this guy has even tried to study chemistry. Whatever stopped him in the middle of it does not matter. He was bright enough to take it on in the first place, and he probably made it at least half through it. He comes from a working class background, so it's likely that his parents could no longer afford carrying his bills. There are ways to finance that through the state, but maybe he had some pride left. He didn't want to be dependent on the state, because millennials were very conservative. They were very conservative. They were very professional people who kept working when they were no longer paid. That's the millennial generation, and that is very often forgotten when we now talk about how people sit on their college debts and don't know how to repay them, and that they should have chosen different courses. He chose chemistry. And even those who studied gender, social humanities, blah, 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 they were put on that track with wrong incentives. The older generation created a lot of wrong incentives, claiming that this is freedom, that you don't help your little ones finding out whether some arts degree helps you better in life than some engineering or not. Let them find out, everything goes. That was the general approach. And then the financial crash happened, and the same generation that had its curriculum littered with nonsense courses, quite frankly. A lot of the school curriculum is full with arts and stuff that you should do in the spare time, but not in school. They have done what their parents and their teachers and everybody around them, the media, told them to do. They have forgone their youth. They have not had any romantic life. And the result is that they are very resentful in the end. They are without property, without children, and without a family. And that is the situation this man found himself in. And if we want this to stop, we have to tackle the situation. We cannot just say, oh, this rhetoric there and this rhetoric here is the issue. We have to tackle that actual problem. A lot of people could work, would be happy to work on the potholes in the street and lay cables for faster internet, but can't, because society has shunned them. The standards are kept high, while people were forced to change their jobs and minds, and very often also the location of where they lived. And the CVs are very often broken. Many CVs are broken, and people don't know how to start in a company. There's the minimum wage that stops them, and then there's the minimum wage. You either create enough value to get paid €8 or $1 per hour, or you're not employed. That's just how it is, and eventually you run out of money. You can find some room or some car for very little money, but the alternative we are left with is either internship with no money, or something that has to jump a bar. And many millennials apparently are incels because they do no longer jump that bar, because the CV is broken. And of course they could also work in low-level jobs. They could work as cashiers, for example. But then they have to work alongside colleagues who have put no effort into their education and into their career. And we are talking about the generation that sacrificed everything for the career. Okay, this is something that is egregiously under-discussed. Steve Bannon talks about it, Tucker Carlson talks about it, but nobody else. And this Yom Kippur attack is a result of this. Of course, he is blaming Jews, and as the economy is dwindling, I'm already seeing that we will most certainly face this. If the interest rate of the central banks is not perfect, it's the Jew. If you don't get enough money, it's because the Jews don't lend you money. The economic down spiral will also result in more anti-Semitism as it goes along. And this anti-religion stuff just marks for me that he is still partly into leftism. The indoctrination is just too big that he believes he can document the ideologies of all people around him. And if he is this group or that group, the thinking would change magically. And his enemies in the they think in the same terms. Now the question is about how to shut him up. That's not going to stop anybody. If people get to the level of that despair that you see here, who are ready to get killed in an attack and who are ready to go to prison for the rest of their lives, this level of despair does not go away if you don't even put effort into talking to them. This level of despair is only increased if you become more aggressive towards them. And the German anti-Semitism commissioner Felix Klein, a Gentile by the way, suggests that making jokes about Jews in private life or talking negatively about them should cause negative consequences for those who do. That's not how you change minds. This is not how you change minds. This is how you intensify the resentment against Jews. And quite frankly, I hate all these commissioners, no matter if they are gender commissioners or gay commissioners or anti-Semitism commissioners. They all should work for the supermarket next door. They should not be in high offices, okay? So far, the recession that has already started is already blamed on other people by, of course, our mainstream media who do not care about Jews at all. And they say every time when they have news about the details of it, that it's caused by the China-American trade war or by Brexit. They do not admit that there is some guilt of their own involved in this. And we have a situation where investors are driven out of the country because of some animals they find always. Whenever somebody tries to dig a hole, they find a rat or a bat or a moth or something of that sort. There was a recent case in Frankfurt where, and I'm not kidding, where they found a hamster. They found a hamster, and this very hamster exists not only in the entirety of this continent, in continental Europe, but also across Asia, including China. It's a rodent that lives in 2 continents, and it's going extinct only in Frankfurt because they want to build homes there. And then they claim that you cannot find rooms for living anymore, and that therefore the state has to build all these things. So there is absolutely no acknowledgement of guilt. We have now this extinction rebellion that's going mad about capitalism, and the Jews will be the next to blame, because nobody can accept that driving out everybody who is productive and shutting the doors to everybody who is willing to work hard could be the reason for an economic downturn. No, it must be somebody else. It must be Trump. It must be Brexit. And sooner or later, it will be the Jews. Okay. And of course, as an interim scapegoat, they have the overall human feeling of hate. So here is Mr. Seehofer speaking about hate.
Das ist immer ein Vorlauf für tatsächliche Gewalt. Nachdem Worte nicht immer reichen, bin ich gemeinsam mit der Bundesjustizministerin schon seit einigen Tagen dabei, wie wir strafrechtlich relevante Hassäußerungen im Internet verfolgen.
And of course, he is not interested in solving the problem. This cardinal sin style approach to basic human emotions like hate is just a way to latch on more totalitarian means of government. Andrea Lindholz, the interior minister of the state Bavaria, Mr. Seehofer is the federal minister, the counterpart on the federal level, even suggests to shut down platforms altogether because of hate.
Wir müssen das Netz genauso betrachten wie die reale Welt. Das heißt, unsere Sicherheitsbehörden brauchen für die Vorfeldüberwachung die gleichen Möglichkeiten, die sie auch in der realen Welt haben. Und wir müssen uns stärker auch im Vorfeld den Plattformen widmen und auch möglicherweise über ein schnelleres Abschalten bestimmter Plattformen nachdenken.
Then the playing game goes on. This is also not really helping Jews because, you know, if always everybody else is to blame and nobody cares about the reasons, then eventually somebody will blame the Jews. And Markus Söder so far blames Björn Höcke. He has absolutely nothing to do with the attack, but that is, you know, it is training. It is just training how people are supposed to just simply point their fingers on others. Sooner or later it will be us. And then there's our president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier. He claims to be concerned about the death of Jews and that he, of course, wants to crack down on right-wingers.
Ich bin es leid, dass Rechtsextremismus offen das Wort geredet wird und diese Borniertheit klammheimliche Zustimmung findet in unserem Land. Ich sage es deutlich, wer dafür auch nur einen Funken Verständnis aufbringt, der macht sich mitschuldig für Taten wie gestern.
And this comes from a guy who has laid a wreath at the tomb of Yasser Arafat and who is the body of Jeremy Corbyn, who did the same on the grave of the 1972 Munich massacre terrorist Atef Psaiso. It's like listening to Ilhan Omar being concerned about the death of Jews. Mind-boggling.
Now, of course, we see everybody trying to exploit the situation. For example, our politicians suggest new censorship laws and new commissioners are supposed to be hired and get tax money for their living and so on and so on. And one group that struck my attention is the Dachverband der Islamischen Gemeinden in Deutschland, the Association of the Muslim Communities in Germany. I understand that they have also been sort of the victim, but the way they present themselves is, you know, as the main victim is decidedly different from how the Jewish community responded. And I wanted to present both reactions to you so that you can see the difference. So the Muslims reacted with, we are upset and outraged over this coward and criminal act of terror. And by the way, they are right about this cowardice part. The Jews did not have breakfast. We regard this terror attack on the Jewish holiday as politically motivated. So they did not even bother to look up what holiday that was, Yom Kippur. And I could not imagine, you know, if the roles were reversed, that we would not say on Bayram or on Fitr or whatever, that we would say on that Muslim holiday, sorry for that attack. You know, that's kind of wording that sends the chills down my spine. They continue with terrorists want to divide society and take hate and violence into our population. Again, hate is built up as the demon, but this is kind of how the entire society flows right now. We are back into this cardinal sin mode that I mentioned again and again, and it is at the moment this scapegoat for everything. So, okay. It's hate, but what upsets me about this quote is that they speak about the division, and differently from America, because this is not a one-off statement. The Muslims and also the leftists speak a lot about how conservatives divide the culture or divide society, and what they mean or when they bring that up is always when conservatives have a different opinion. And of course, yes, America and the Western world, we are all divided. It's true. But the core problem is not that we are divided. Actually, pluralist society should be divided. We all should be able to bring our experiences to the table and discuss them freely. What is concerning is that we have a situation where we attack each other, where we become aggressive over each other for having different opinions. So the division or having a different view or being divided is not the issue in itself, but this is very strongly stressed in Germany and by the Muslims in Germany particularly, and is very dangerous. You can mention that you would like to agree more with other people, but on that entire lockstep appeal front, if you overdo that lockstep demands, the sound gets a very sick vibe to it, you understand? So they continue with, we confirm that no matter if we are Jews, Christians, Muslims or non-religious citizens, that we will be defensive against the growing right-wing extremism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia in Germany. So here they snuck in the Islamophobia, even though the kebab was only attacked after the shooter did not make it into the synagogue, and the dead people, I think they are not Muslim. I think both are not Muslim. It doesn't really matter. I'm not even sure if they are Jewish, but the motivation of the attacker was actually to kill Jews and not Muslims. That was only an afterthought, as he tried to kill then as many people as possible, and probably did take a Muslim shop as as a target, as an afterthought. Okay, so I do understand that he has an anti-immigrant sentiment, but he's probably not driven by Islamophobia. His entire speech about his motivation at the beginning of his video speaks about the replacement of immigrants and so on and so on. He does not speak about Islam at all. So they try to sneak in the victimhood claim for their religion, which is the second largest religion, and we treat it on global forums like the internet as if they were a minority globally. It's the second largest religion, and on the internet they are most certainly not a minority. So the Jewish community reacted very differently, and I think that has strong reasons, and it's also the reason why I make the video the way I do. They have, they're following the zeitgeist with the sentence, the real enemy is hatred. That is, of course, sensible, since it seems that it is something we can all agree on, and the entire statement peeks through that the Jewish community is divided, that we have a lot of left-wing Jews, conservative Jews, people from all walks of life. So the statement says then, no matter who, whether against Jews, Christians, Muslims, Sunnis or Shiites, or against atheists or agnostics, against women or men, against people with or without disabilities, against the sick or the healthy, against the people who are supposedly too intelligent or not intelligent enough, against rich or poor, but also against those with certain professions, e.g. coal miners, soldiers, or police officers, against sport utility vehicle drivers or cyclists. And what is interesting here is they have chosen typical targets of hate of the left and mixed them with targets of hate of the right, because hate is a human sentiment. And what they say is we all should calm down a bit. We all should calm down, which is very sensible. I agree with that completely. It is mostly coal miners and soldiers and policemen who are under attack. It is very rarely actually Jews or Muslims. And we have to broaden that debate over how we treat each other in general, and cannot take as a conclusion or as the exclusive conclusion that we have to be mean to the right people all the time. We have to dial back a bit. We have to calm down. Then we have to think about the purpose of life, maybe. We are back to that, apparently, because the motivation of the shooter was not that he was radicalized over the internet or whatever. He was in a completely loser situation. He completely forfeited all options in his life, or did not make it to the places in society where he maybe had belonged. I mean, given his skills, what he could have contributed to the community, and he felt incredibly frustrated about it. That's for sure. As I've mentioned, he left this loser notes in his apartment. And what we see at the moment is the left giving suggestions of what is a purpose in life. For example, they talk a lot about the climate change stuff, that you have to fight that. And you cannot select a purpose for another person. People need to feel gratitude for what they do, and they need to believe in the things that they do every day in their lives, and particularly men. And this is maybe also a terribly under-discussed issue, and that's very dangerous. Women don't like to work outside the home, and they talk about life-work balance, because work is for them like being dead for some hours a day, and then they come home and are alive, while men actually go to their office and try to achieve something. Okay, so men are more comfortable working outside their homes than women are, and for men, you cannot just give them some time outside the home and say that this is now purpose, accept it. You must now believe that climate is changing because of CO2 emissions, and you must now fight against that CO2 emissions. That's not how a man operates. Okay, you need to find a purpose, and must be a real one. A man understands that he has to defend his homeland. He has to build up a home, a house, maybe a house for somebody else. He needs to create a service for somebody else, or a product for somebody else. He wants to advance technology, and he wants to advance medicine. These are the motivations of a typical man. And a smart man like this guy who tried to study chemistry and was then an engineer, he's most certainly willing to work really hard in something that he truly believes in. And it's a shame for society that we could not make use of him. It's not only that he failed us in the end, which he clearly did. I mean, he became a murderer, but it's also that we failed him. And I think to solve the problem and to avoid these things in future, we have to think really hard how we don't fail people like him ever again. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye.